Poaching threats and frogs, lots and lots of frogs, by user objective_uncount. This is another story about Pops, my grandfather, and how he got some sweet revenge on dun squatters/poachers. This goes way back to the 90s, to be exact 1998. I was 10 years old. My farm back then was Pop's family farm. It's way up north in Ontario. My farm is not a small farm in the area, it's the biggest plot of land, not only that it has the most workable farmland. There's about 80 acres of good workable farmland, that's including pastures, and another 120 acres of dense forest and marshland. It is northern Ontario. Back in the 90s, northern Ontario had a breakout of this type of moth. They would spin silk high in the trees. Really, they caused no harm other than a nuisance, but the government had the great idea to crop dust the forests on Ontario, causing an ecological disaster. With the loss of the moths and the chemicals in the water, a type of frog was nearly wiped out. We called them leopard frogs. They are green with these big black spots on them. After that, they were put on the endangered species list. The back end of my property runs off into a small marshland and into the lake, and back in the 90s Pops was having a problem with poachers. They were camping in the back area, hunting out of season, killing and eating turtles out of the marsh and just fucking up the property. Back in the day, that forest was my playground. I know that area like the back of my hand, but unfortunately I had a run-in with the poachers. They threatened to shoot a 10-year-old child. Of course I went out there with Pops and our local lawman, but they had packed up and were gone before we got there. Unfortunately they returned the week after. We could hear the rifle shots. Pops tried to find them with the lawman several times, but with no luck. Now here's where all the information from the start comes into play. Pops, as hard as he tried, wanted them gone, but it wasn't working. Pops was also a fisherman, and his favorite bait were bone other than the leopard frog. But because they made it on the endangered species list, the use was outright banned. Pops, being the responsible fisherman and generally caring about the land, figured, oh hell, now's the time to kill two birds with one stone. He approached the Canadian Fishery and Game Wardens, and through a lot of work got in touch with an ecological survey team who decided that our little marsh was the perfect place for a spawning pool to raise little leopard frogs. And that's what happened. The back area where our marsh was fenced in, and they started breeding tadpoles to brood in our marsh. Not only that, the poachers' hunting ground happened to fall in the protected zone. Once the work happened, it took a full year for the poachers to return. But Pops had a weapon now. His phone. Once he could hear that familiar sound of rifles going off where no rifle fire should be, he made a single phone call to the game warden. They had over a dozen wardens up there in less than an hour, and the poachers were caught. Not only were they caught with the carcass of a bear and other animals, they were found with buckets and buckets of our little leopard frogs. They were caught, but not only did they hunt without a license, they also poached an endangered species to be used as an illegal bait. From what learned through the locals, they did 2 years in big-time prison. All because Pops cared about the little froggies. Oh yeah, over 5 million of the frogs were raised on that marsh over 10 years, being released through marshes and forests in Ontario. You would have a hard time finding a leopard frog across Ontario they was not somehow related to a frog that came out of my little marsh.